Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics in Africa and Arabia. The Tunisian government under President Kais Saied is stepping up its crackdown on suspected adversaries. Now they have arrested several members of the opposition and even a radio director. The security forces took into custody Nuruddin Biri, a leader of the main opposition party, and that's the moderate Islamist Ennahda. The government opponents accused Tunisia's President Kais Saied of a coup d'etat. He ousted parliament in 2021 and replaced the government with ministers he had chosen. He also dismissed dozens of judges. And so he also pushed ahead with a referendum in 22 that changed the constitution so that almost all power in the country rests in the hands of the president. However, only around 30% of the population eligible to vote took part in the referendum. More than 94% voted in favor of the constitutional amendment, though. According to a report in the newspaper Tunisie Numérique, the opposition leader Biri, who has now been arrested, described the referendum as theater in which the result is already known in advance. Dissatisfaction with the once popular President Saied is currently growing. According to surveys, 49% of people would still vote for him again. Previously, his approval rating was 90%. However, the Tunisians do not see any serious political alternative either. According to the poll, other potential presidential candidates received less than 10% approval. Despite massive protests, Israel's right-wing religious government had pushed ahead with its plan to weaken the judicial system. The parliament, the Knesset, approved part of the controversial judicial reform in the first of three readings on Tuesday night after an 8-hour session. Tens of thousands of people protested nationwide on Monday against the plans of the right-wing religious government. Meanwhile, the German Federal Minister of Justice, Marc visited the country for the first time since the Israeli government was sworn in. The politician found warning words without mentioning the proposed law directly. Learning from history means recognizing that you should look for broad majorities if you want to change the rules of the game of democratic competition and the interaction of constitutional bodies, is what Buschmann said at an exhibition opening in Tel Aviv in the evening. In Germany, amendments to the basic law here are only possible with a two-thirds majority in the Bundestag and the Bundesrat, that's two councils. And that usually only succeeds if large sections of the opposition are also convinced of the need for change. The goal of the judicial reform planned by the Israeli government is to enable the parliament, currently dominated by the government, to overturn decisions of the highest court with a simple majority. Politicians should also be given influence in the appointment of judges. Critics see the democratic separation of powers in danger, and there have been repeated mass demonstrations against the coalition's plans. The right-wing religious government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, they argue that the Supreme Court is currently exercising too much political influence. Because Israel does not have a written constitution and the state is instead based on a set of basic laws, the Supreme Court is of particular importance in upholding the rule of law and the human rights. President Yitzhak Herzog warned of a constitutional and social collapse in Israel if the government implemented its plans uncompromisingly and against all odds. A violent conflict is raging in the East African region of Somaliland. According to the United Nations, more than 60,000 people have already fled to neighboring Ethiopia. Most of them are women and children. That was said by the UN refugee agency UNHCR on Friday. They fled from the northern city of Las Ka'anot to the Somali region of Ethiopia, an extremely remote area. And according to the UNHCR, many have relatives who were killed in the clashes or were separated from family members while fleeing. Since the end of 22, there have been repeated violent clashes in the breakaway region of Somaliland. Laascaanoot is a disputed town claimed by Somaliland as well as neighboring semi-autonomous Puntland. The two regions blame each other for the outbreak of violence. In early February, 3 provinces of Somaliland, including Sool province, where Laascaanoot is located, announced that they wanted to become part of Somalia again. Somaliland, a region in northern Somalia with a population of around 3.5 million, has been virtually independent for more than 3 decades. Under international law, however, the country is only recognized by Taiwan. Somalia's federal member state of Puntland is semi-autonomous with a population of around 2 million. According to military sources, armed terrorists have killed at least 51 soldiers in Burkina Faso. The military then neutralized around 160 terrorists and destroyed their equipment in air raids, as the General Staff said. Armed groups are active in the Sahel state with around 21 million inhabitants, and some of which belong to the terrorist group ISIS or the terrorist network Al-Qaeda. The attack took place on Friday in the Oudalan region at the northernmost tip of the country, which borders to the states of Mali and Niger, which are also terrorized by Islamist extremists. The army said a unit had become the target of a complex attack on a road. After 8 deaths were initially reported, 43 more bodies were found on the course of Monday. But the information could not be independently verified to date. The country in the Sahel zone, which is impoverished despite rich gold deposits, is also suffering from droughts and hunger crises. Interim President Ibrahim Traoré has ruled the unstable state since a military coup in September. Up until this month, the former colonial power France had stationed about 400 soldiers in Burkina Faso to help the army against groups attacking increasingly deep in the country. However, at the request of Traoré's government, France is currently withdrawing its armed forces. The expulsion from Burkina Faso followed after deterioration in relations between the two countries. There had also been protests in the country against the French soldiers, with allegations that France was not doing enough to fight the terrorists. After withdrawing from Burkina Faso and Mali, France wants to become more involved in the Ivory Coast. The former colonial power is thus continuing to adjust its operations against extremists in West Africa. According to activists and state media, at least 53 people were killed in an attack by the terrorist organization Islamic State or ISIS in Syria. The attack occurred in the eastern city of al-Sukhna. The state agency SANA and the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported on Friday evening. The human rights organization Amnesty International has sharply criticized the awarding of the 2023 Club World Cup to Saudi Arabia as well. The World Football Association FIFA has once again ignored the cruel human rights records of the Gulf state, said Stephen Cockburn, head of Amnesty's Department for Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. That was according to a statement. FIFA once again disregards its own human rights policy and is complicit in a blatant sports washing. The term sports washing refers to efforts to improve one's own image by investing in sport. Saudi Arabia has been criticized internationally for human rights violations. According to Amnesty, 81 people were executed in one day last year in the neighboring country of World Cup host Qatar. Freedom of expression and assembly are severely restricted, and alcohol and homosexuality are strictly forbidden. FIFA decided on the mini-tournament on Monday, and the Club World Cup will be played from December 12th to 22nd, and Saudi Arabia is said to be aiming for an application of the 2030 World Cup. 5-time world footballer Cristiano Ronaldo has been playing in the Saudi League since this winter. According to the World Association, the decision for Saudi Arabia in the FIFA Council was unanimous. The organization Amnesty International sees evidence of war crimes by the alleged Rwandan-backed M23 rebel group in eastern DRC. In a report, human rights experts used witness statements to reconstruct at least 20 killings and 66 rapes within a few days in November in the eastern Congolese province of North Kivu. The scale and brutality of the gang rapes are particularly shocking, it said. There is evidence that the M23 rebels systematically punished and humiliated civilians they suspected of collaborating with enemy rebels, Amnesty said. These war crimes could constitute crimes against humanity. The M23 movement, founded in 2012, consists mostly of former soldiers of the Congolese army. The rebels in eastern Congo have been attacking civilians and the Congolese army again for almost a year. The military has repeatedly blamed M23 for killing hundreds of civilians in North Kivu. According to military sources, 356 Rwandan soldiers crossed the border on Thursday evening to provide support to M23 rebels. The neighboring country of Rwanda always rejects such accusations, although United Nations experts had submitted evidence of support in the past. The European Union and the United States, among others, have called on Rwanda to stop supporting the rebels. And this concludes this week's video on the politics in Africa and Arabia. And I'll see you in my next video tomorrow. I'll be back.